Writer J.K. Rowling cites several writers as influences in her creation of her best-selling Harry Potter series. Rowling has never openly credited any single author with inspiration, saying, "I haven't got the faintest idea where my ideas come from or how my imagination works. I'm just grateful that it does, because it gives me more entertainment than it gives anyone else." However, she has mentioned a number of favorite authors as probable influences in her creation of Harry Potter. Rowling has said, "I've taken horrible liberties with folklore and mythology, but I'm quite unashamed about that, because British folklore and British mythology is a totally bastard mythology. You know, we've been invaded by people, we've appropriated their gods, we've taken their mythical creatures, and we've sodded them all together to make, what I would say, is one of the richest folklores in the world, because it's so varied. So I feel no compunction about borrowing from that freely, but adding a few things of my own." When an interviewer said that saving Cedric's body resembled the actions of Hector, Achilles, and Patroclus in the Iliad, Rowling said, "That's where it came from. That really moved me when I read that when I was 19. The idea of the desecration of a body, a very ancient idea. I was thinking of that when Harry saved Cedric's body." A number of commentators have drawn attention to the biblical themes and references in J.K. Rowling's final Harry Potter novel, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. In an August 2007 issue of Newsweek, Lisa Miller commented that Harry dies and then comes back to life to save humankind, like Christ. She points out the title of the chapter in which this occurs, King's Cross, a possible allusion to Christ's cross. Also, she outlines the scene in which Harry is temporarily dead, pointing out that it places Harry in a very heaven-like setting where he talks to a father figure whose supernatural powers are accompanied by a profound message of love. Jeffrey Weiss adds, in the Dallas Morning News, that the biblical quotation, "And the last enemy that shall be destroyed is death," 1 Corinthians 15 verse 26, featured on the tombstones of Harry's parents, refers to Christ's resurrection. The quotation on Dumbledore's family tomb, "Where your treasure is, your heart will be also," is from Matthew 6 verse 21, and refers to knowing which things in life are of true value. They are very British books, Rowling revealed to an Open Book conference in October 2007. So on a very practical note, Harry was going to find biblical quotations on tombstones. I think those two particular quotations he finds on the tombstones at Godric's Hollow, they almost epitomize the whole series. Deathly Hallows begins with a pair of epigraphs, one from Quaker leader William Penn's More Fruits of Solitude and one from Aeschylus the Libation Bearers. I really enjoyed choosing those two quotations because one is pagan, of course, and one is from a Christian tradition, Rowling said. I'd known it was going to be those two passages since Chamber was published. I always knew that, if I could use them at the beginning of Book 7, then I'd queued up the ending perfectly. If they were relevant, then I went where I needed to go. They just say it all to me, they really do. In a July 2007 web chat hosted by her publisher Bloomsbury, Rowling stated that the Pardoner's Tale of Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales was an inspiration for A.F. Oakdale, the tale of the three brothers, retold by Xenophilius Lovegood in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. In the tale, three brothers outwit death by magicking a bridge to cross a dangerous river. Death, angry at being cheated, offers to give them three gifts, the Deathly Hallows, as a reward for evading him. The first two die as a result of the gifts granted to them, but the third uses his gift wisely and dies in his bed an old man. In The Pardoner's Tale, 3 rogues are told that if they look under a tree, they can find a means to defeat death. Instead they find gold, and, overcome with greed, eventually kill each other to possess it. Rowling has cited William Shakespeare's Macbeth as an influence. In an interview with the Leaky Cauldron and MuggleNet, when asked, "What if Voldemort never heard the prophecy?" she said, "It's the Macbeth idea. I absolutely adore Macbeth. It is possibly my favorite Shakespeare play." And that's the question, isn't it? If Macbeth hadn't met the witches, would he have killed Duncan? Would any of it have happened? Is it fated, or did he make it happen? I believe he made it happen. On her website, she referred to Macbeth again in discussing the prophecy. The prophecy becomes the catalyst for a situation that would never have occurred if it had not been made. Rowling cites Jane Austen as her favorite author and a major influence. Rowling has said, "My attitude to Jane Austen is accurately summed up by that wonderful line from Cold Comfort Farm. One of the disadvantages of almost universal education was that all kinds of people gained a familiarity with one's favorite books. It gave one a curious feeling, like seeing a drunken stranger wrapped in one's dressing gown." The Harry Potter series is known for its twist endings, and Rowling has stated that, "I have never set up a surprise ending in a Harry Potter book without knowing I can never, and will never, do it anywhere near as well as Austen did in Emma." Rowling Freck. NTLY mentions E. Nesbit in interview, citing her very real child characters. In 2000, she said, "I think I identify with E. Nesbit more than any other writer," and described Nesbit's The Story of the Treasure Seekers as Exhibit A for prohibition of all children's literature by anyone who cannot remember exactly how it felt to be a child. In a 2007 reading for students in New Orleans, Rowling said that the first book to inspire her was Kenneth Graham's children's fantasy The Wind in the Willows, read to her when she had the measles at age 4. Rowling has also cited the work of Christian essayist and mystery writer Dorothy L. Sayers as an influence on her work, saying, "There's a theory, this applies to detective novels, and then Harry, which is not really a detective novel, but it feels like one sometimes, that you should not have romantic intrigue in a detective book." Dorothy L. Sayers, who is queen of the genre, said, and then broke her own rule, but said, that there is no place for romance in a detective story except that it can be useful to camouflage other people's motives. That's true, it is a very useful trick. I've used that on Percy, and I've used that to a degree on Tonks in this book, as a red herring. But having said that, I disagree inasmuch as mine are very character-driven books, and it's so important, therefore, that we see these characters fall in love, which is a necessary part of life. Rowling has said she was a fan of the works of C.S. Lewis as a child, and cites the influence of his The Chronicles of Narnia on her work. "I found myself thinking about the wardrobe route to Narnia when Harry is told he has to hurl himself at a barrier in King's Cross Station. It dissolves and he's on platform 9 3/4, and there's the train for Hogwarts." She is, however, at pains to stress the differences between Narnia and her world. "Narnia is literally a different world," she says, "whereas in the Harry books you go into a world within a all that you can see if you happen to belong." A lot of the humor comes from collisions between the magic and the everyday world. Generally there isn't much humor in the Narnia books, although I adored them when I was a child. I got so caught up I didn't think C.S. Lewis was especially preachy. Reading them now I find that his subliminal message isn't very subliminal. New York Times writer Charles McGrath notes the similarity between Dudley Dursley, the obnoxious son of Harry's neglectful guardians, and Eustace Scrubb, the spoiled brat who torments the main characters until converted by Aslan. In an interview in The Scotsman in 2002, Rowling described Elizabeth Gudge's The Little White Horse as having, perhaps more than any other book, a direct influence on the Harry Potter books. The author always included details of what her characters were eating, and I remember liking that. You may have noticed that I always list the food being eaten at Hogwarts. Rowling said in Oh That Go, DGE was the only author whose influence I was conscious of. She always described exactly what the children were eating, and I really liked knowing what they had in their sandwiches. Rowling also cites the work of T.H. White, a grammar school teacher, and the author of the well-known children's classic saga, The Once and Future King, which tells the story of King Arthur of Britain, from childhood to grave. Perhaps the best-known book from this saga is The Sword in the Stone, which was made into an animated movie by Walt Disney. Arthur is a small scruffy-haired orphan who meets the wizard Merlin, who has an owl, Archimedes, and acts, much like Dumbledore, in the manner of an absent-minded professor who takes him to a castle to educate him. As writer Phyllis Morris notes, the parallels between Dumbledore and Merlin do not end with the protection of the hero in danger. In addition to both characters sporting long, flowing beards and blue eyes, according to T.H. White, Merlin W. as King Arthur's mentor and guide, as Dumbledore has been Harry's guide and mentor. Rowling describes Wart as Harry's spiritual ancestor. Rowling is also a fan of Paul Gallico, especially Manx Mouse. That's a great book. Gallico manages the fine line between magic and reality so skillfully, to the point where the most fantastic events feel plausible. In the Scotsman interview, Rowling described civil rights activist Jessica Mitford as my most influential writer, saying, I love the way she never outgrew some of her adolescent traits, remaining true to her politics. She was a self-taught socialist throughout her life. In a review of Decca, The Letters of Jessica Mitford, she went further saying, Jessica Mitford has been my heroine since I was 14 years old, when I overheard my formidable great-aunt discussing how Mitford had run away at the age of 19 to fight with the Reds in the Spanish Civil War, and claims what inspired her about Mitford was that she was incurably and instinctively rebellious, brave, adventurous, funny and irreverent. She liked nothing better than a good fight, preferably against a pompous and hypocritical target.